You're still watching them, so we're going to keep going. It's time to rank the 6th albums from classic death metal bands. Alright, let's kick things off with a big one. Cannibal Corpse, Gallery of Suicide, 1998. This is the first album with Pat O'Brien on guitar, better production overall too, I would say. Disposal of the Body has a great riff on it alongside the fun, fast vocals. We got a music video for Sentenced to Burn. Chambers of Blood, you can hear them broadening their songwriting skills, and I also enjoy From Skin to Liquid. It just feels a little bit more complex and with more atmosphere too. Another one that I hear commonly cited as a favorite from the fans, I'm going to put this one at fantastic. Let's do Immolation, Harnessing Ruin, 2005. Some great moments to be found on this one. That sudden shift on Our Savior Sleeps actually really got me, and it's reaction video worthy. Harnessing Ruin has a really great layered guitar intro with tons of atmosphere. It's also pretty dynamic too, with other tracks like Dead to Me taking you on a bit of a journey. I wouldn't say it's as consistent as some of their other albums all the way through, so I'm going to put this one at great. Morbid Angel time again with Gateways to Annihilation in 2000. Slower, kind of more droning style on this one. It's also the last album with Eric Rutan. And again, I'm going to say, like, am I kind of crazy for enjoying this era? Because there are aspects of this that I kind of enjoy. To me, like, these are actually more enjoyable than some of their other albums. Summoning Redemption is a pretty killer track, although I will say after that they do start leaning a bit more heavily into the doom elements, and at that point it loses a lot of what I found interesting about the last two albums. So this one dips down quite a bit from those. Gonna go to good tier. Alright, Cryptopsy, The Unspoken King in 2008. This is apparently hated by many fans for switching to more of a deathcore style. Reminds me a little bit of early Aborted, and I can see why the purists would hate this, but I think there's also a lot to enjoy here, from the blast beats to the noodly technical guitars. In many ways it does sound like a different band, but the old formula also seemed to be going a little bit stale, so I'm kind of torn on this one as my overall thoughts. I think my bigger issue is that I still don't find these songs to be very engaging. I could definitely do without the horrible clean vocals, which kind of remind me of local metalcore acts I would watch back in high school. It's definitely not great, but not really for the reasons I think a lot of people give. It has nothing to do with the genre switch for me. I just don't think it's as well written, so I'm going to put it at okay, not my thing. Then we have Nile with Those Whom the Gods Detest in 2009. This feels like a bit of a course correction and more of what fans probably expected after Annihilation of the Wicked. And while this definitely sounds better, I take issues with how Nile continued to lean into the doom riffs to stretch songs longer than maybe they need to be. Thankfully, in their case, this is often complemented with some really unique regional touches and sudden shifts in direction, as with Kafir. Still a strong outing with plenty of great songs, and on this list, relatively, like, much higher, I would much more likely listen to this than a lot of these other albums, so it's going to fantastic. Suffocation, Blood Oath, 2009. So this was their first time making Billboard at 135, so quite a benchmark moment for them. But really, it's just another solid, albeit not that wildly interesting album to me. I like Come Hell or High Priest and Undeserving. It's pretty solid. I just don't have a ton to say about it. I'm ultimately going to put it at great tier. Similarly, not as much to say about Bolt Thrower with Mercenary, 1998. Interesting to see, like, again, how highly rated this is with fans, but I don't really get it. Like, there's certain Bolt Thrower albums I've enjoyed, but this one, right from the opening track, it kind of puts me to sleep, to be honest.
How dare you!
Very repetitive. I just find it dull, because it just falls into a lot of just death doomy kind of tropes. Just not very enjoyable to listen to me, personally. I wish I had more to say, but I just don't. It's definitely one of the... All of this is subjective, as I always say, but I think more than anything else when it comes to these more kind of like death doomy kind of things, the more repetitious style, that's a personal preference of mine, and so for that reason I'm putting them at good tier. Deicide in Torment in Hell in 2001. This one highly criticized for being rushed out and not meeting songwriting standards, even according to the band. Steve said that they were kind of burnt out on each other at this point. They rarely play any of these songs live, which definitely tells you something. Personally, I also find it pretty lame, but I feel like it's better than the last one, maybe in some ways in terms of instrumentation. Just feels like kind of a lower tier Cannibal Corpse album. Not painful to listen to, but definitely bottoming out on this list at okay, not really my thing. Time for a personal favorite of mine in Behemoth with Zos Kia Cultus in 2002. Now, if you ask me, this is one of Behemoth's best albums and my favorite of this era of their sound. I'm still shocked that Cover Killer Nation ranked this one so low because this is an amazing album that's still got that raw 90s death metal sound with lots of heavy grooves and bangers like As Above, So Below, which continues to be one of my favorite Behemoth tracks. You've got the Harlot of Saints, Blackest of the Black, No Sympathy for Fools, and of course the title track. Just a fantastic take on the sound of this time from a Polish perspective. I'm putting this one up at perfection. Then we have Obituary with Frozen in Time, 2005. Now, with an opening track called Redneck Stomp, how could you not at least be interested in this album? And fortunately, the hooks on this are just so much stronger than the last few, in my opinion. I feel like Alan is giving me something to actually chew on here with his final outing with the band. Scott Burns also retired after producing this release. It's nice to see them also really embracing shorter runtimes for thrashy, often Slayer-esque sounding ragers like On the Floor, as well as more groovy tracks like Blindsided. Still not exactly a tour de force, but a fun album nonetheless that I am putting at fantastic for this particular list. That brings us to Autopsy with the Headless Ritual in 2013. Another mashup of brute force, D-beat infused mosh pit fuel, and groovy, slimy doom. It feels almost like listening to a live performance or even a ritual, which fitting to the title. Just very raw and unrefined, and it has some pretty psychedelic sounding guitar solos and sections too. Not something I'd have on regular rotation, but pretty wild and somewhat unique for a listen, so ultimately that elevated this one for me on this particular list. I'm putting it at great tier. Then we're back to Poland with Vader and the Beast in 2004, and unfortunately I feel like this is one of their weakest albums. It has a really dull opening song. Firebringer is okay, but ultimately, like, this is sort of a bland album in my opinion, just very forgettable. The only track that really stands out is The Zone, and even that one doesn't make it into like my favorite Vader track, so not bad, just nothing really special either. I'm gonna put it at good tier. I can enjoy it, but I'm going to reach for so many other Vader albums over this one. Dying Fetus Descend into Depravity, 2009. So I joked in my Dying Fetus tier list that I think that this album cover reminds me a lot of like the Max Payne video game cover. That aside, similar issues with this one that I had with the last one. They are a trio at this point, kind of stripped back and just very generic feel to it again, but I will say it feels better than the last album overall and that it has more standout moments. Shepherd's Commandment is an absolute riff machine. The title track is pretty solid. Ethos of Coercion has a really nice groove and also a nice change in pace and atmosphere towards the end. Not terrible, but on this list it also ended up slipping to the bottom since I do limit myself to like max 4 per tier. So going to kind of higher up on okay, not my thing. Then I'm going to kind of cheat here with Carcass and Surgical Steel in 2013. So again, cheating because this is more of a melodic death metal album and much more of the modern era, but it's just so good and I couldn't help myself. Carcass just still managed to roll in enough of their death and grind roots to make it stand out from a lot of other melodic death metal bands. And it's just a start to finish banger. Like, every track is amazing, proof that they are still one of the GOATs out there. So I'm going to put it at perfection tier, and if you get mad about that, you can shove it. All right, then time for another classic with Death, Symbolic, 1995. Definitely got some people upset with my thoughts on this album during my Death discography tier list. I just struggle in really making a connection with this one for some reason, similar to what I've said about Human.
You serious?
That said, on this most recent re-listen, I've definitely warmed to it some. The guitar work and atmosphere is undeniable. I just find the songwriting to be a little bit meandering at times, but I will say the second half, I think, is way better than the first half. Without Judgment, Crystal Mountain, and Misanthrope are probably my personal favorites, and regardless, even Death's worst albums tend to be way better than most other albums in the genre, and I'd say that's definitely the case here. I know a lot would put it at perfection, but I'm at least gonna put it at fantastic. Pretty high at that, like the top of fantastic. Good example of how each of these tier lists is entirely self-contained. Next up is Incantation with Decimate Christendom in 2004. Just a swirling chasm of blast beats, chaotic guitars, and bestial vocals. Mixed, of course, with a good heaping dose of death doom, again, which, as regular viewers know, not my favorite thing, but yeah, it's fine. The album's kind of all over the place. I feel like it's lacking in focus. Similar feelings about this as that Autopsy album, but I find this one to be both more bludgeoning, but also kind of less interesting. Blaspheme the Sacraments is pretty solid. I like the thrashy riffs of Merciless Tyranny. Overall, it's fine. I'm gonna put it at good tier. Then we have Pestilence, our own spacey boys, with Doctrine in 2011. And oh man, that album opening.
Disgusting!
Now, joking aside about Patrick's vocals here, the riffs and drums are really solid, like real, just great kind of old school Meshuggah vibe twisted up with death. Great drum fills on Dissolve. Absolution gets kind of Primus meets Atheist, like just really solid performances all around. It's just that Patrick is kind of a little way over the top here, which I guess was a common criticism from reviewers at the time, but really at 39 minutes you could do way worse, so ultimately this one's going to great tier. And speaking of doing worse, we have 6 Feet Under with 13 in 2005.
How fucking lame.
Like, once more, what can I say? I keep trying. Like, I genuinely do. I go and I listen to the album and I try to be open-minded, but it just seems like it only gets worse from here. Yeah, you know where this is going. Okay, not my thing. Y'all check out this playlist if you've missed any of the other videos in this ongoing series, and as always, let me know down in the comments, how would you rank these albums differently? Let's have a fun conversation about it. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.